welcome to Rogues in the House, or So I'm Writing a Novel. Wait, what do I mean, and who am I? If you're listening to Rogues in the House, you might recognize me from one or two past episodes. My name is Oliver Brackenbury, and normally I'm hosting the podcast So I'm Writing a Novel. I'm here with an actual rogue, Matt John. Hey, Matt.
Hello. I am here indeed, on my show or Oliver's. It depends where you've accessed it.
This isn't quite a Freaky Friday because we haven't body swapped, but we are doing kind of a podcast crossover episode where both Matt and I have new books either out or out soon. Well, both out by the time that I think this recording will come out. In the sense that Matt's book will be out available for purchase on Amazon. We'll talk more about that in a second. And my book is an anthology that I'm publishing, which is crowdfunding until July 20. I should know this. Until July 20th. And then after that, there'll be a bit of a gap while we produce it. And later, of course, you can pre-order it, order it, whatever. So, available in some format, whether it's backing it now as I record it, this conversation with Matt, or whatever later. Anyway, again, there'll be details in the description.
You will be able to get the stuff. It will be in those notes. And odds are you can either put your dollars ahead for Oliver's book, which will be out, I'm sure, in not too long. Or, jump on mine. Hopefully it is out if we solve this cover issue, which is just fun.
Yeah, I did layout design for Matt's book, and we have both been really enjoying the finicky aspects of Amazon KDP, but that's neither here nor there. So what are we doing today precisely? Are we just going to talk over each other with no structure and make loud fart noises? Probably not. I think what we actually probably should do is a kind of chocolate vanilla swirl, alternating interview thing. And Matt and I have talked about this. We're each going to interview the other one about their respective book, doing 5 questions and some chat. And where are we going to start? Well, who starts? Is it going to be me interviewing Matt or Matt interviewing me? Matt, how are we going to resolve this?
The gods will decide. I've got a cast iron, maybe steel, I don't know, but it's a metal D12 or die 12, depending, how you say that. And I'm going to roll it. If it is 1 through 6, I will begin the show by interviewing Oliver. If it is a 7 to a 12, he will begin the show by interviewing me. Are we ready?
I think so.
All right. And let's hear if we can get a good thunk here. Wait, I'll do it on this. Ooh. It is a 6. That means I'm interviewing you first, buddy.
Oh, shit. All right, here we go.
So, get yourself ready. All right, so the gods have decided we will first talk about Oliver's book. Now, first of all, can you just tell us the title of your book and how folks can easily find it on your crowdfunding platform? Because I'm going to say the wrong platform. It is on...
Right. So the title of the book is Beating Hearts and the Battle Axes. It's an anthology of 6 novelette-length stories where basically we're taking sword and sorcery and infusing it with some more spice and romantic through lines in the stories than we generally encounter in the history of the genre. Not never. I was inspired by some classics. But that's sort of the theme of it. And the platform is BackerKit. So if you go to BackerKit.com and you search for Beating Hearts, I promise you we're the only anthology called Beating Hearts and Battle Axes on there. And also you can find a link to it wherever you listen to this. It'll be linked to on newedgeswordandsorcery.com.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the way to easily find it.
And if folks have previously backed New Edge magazine, it's the same platform you used for that, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we used BackerKit earlier this year when we
Kickstarter was the first
blew the
one,
doors
I think,
off
right?
with our 2 new issues.
Yeah. But your first Ness #1, that was Kickstarter, wasn't it?
Yeah, Ness issues 1 and 2 in 2023 we did that on Kickstarter. Right. But for a bunch of reasons, we're not here to talk about crowdfunding in detail. I chose to move to BackerKit as the superior platform.
Yeah, it seemed to really work for you. And actually, we had that conversation privately. But I mean, that's something folks can investigate and find out about.
It's super easy to use, and we even have like a section on the campaign page being like, "Are you new to this platform? Here's how you do it." It's basically the same as Kickstarter in terms of making an account and signing up and all that good stuff. But
yeah, it's simple.
Everything operates more smoothly, in my opinion, under the hood. I literally say on our campaign page, "It's like Kickstarter, but better." So I get to the point on that one.
I can't really say things about Kickstarter because the company I work for uses it, but I mean, it's interesting to watch that market, those platforms diversify. So. Speaking of a diverse approach, I suppose, with Beating Hearts and Battle Axes. You're adding a bit of romance and spice to Sword and Sorcery. Now, at first, one might think, well, that's weird, but not really. And I have my reasons for thinking it's not really weird. But what drew you to that idea? Because, Ness is doing different things. So why is this your first real anthology out of the gate?
Well, actually, it originally started as me thinking about doing special themed issues of New Age Sword and Sorcery. And I just sat with a pad of paper and, threw down a whole bunch of different ideas, as you can imagine. And one of them I was kind of thinking, what if we did something a little along the lines of what became this anthology? Long story short, for boring economic reasons, it made a lot more sense to look at doing it as a book than as an issue of the magazine. And I'm kind of grateful for that because a book is so much more simple.
Yeah.
It's much easier to lay out. Like, we have beautiful wraparound cover art. We have one interior illustration by Trevor Nguyen. We're going to have 6 if we hit our first stretch goal. So that's nice. One illustration, full page for each story. But that's still just one artist I have to deal with. And 6 authors, as opposed to like a combined total of like 40 odd people for a couple of issues of Ness. So, simplifying it was appealing. But also... well, why the subject matter? Sorry, I'm talking too much about the format. Why the subject matter? So it basically came down to the fact that I have found myself reading a lot of classic SNS tales where there might be like a love interest, but I want more about that relationship, and I want the love interest character to be maybe a little more developed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get to know them a little bit better. They're not just like the prize for the main character for succeeding. And this is not an issue exclusive to SNS by far, but certainly, in a lot of the classic stories, I find that the love interest characters are kind of underdeveloped, and you don't get as much of them as you want. Or even there's something about them that is kind of intriguing, but you don't get more. And yet there are examples where it come pretty close to things you might find in our anthology. Like, I'm not going to say anybody in our anthology is the ghost of Robert E. Howard returned, but the story that absolutely is in the back of my mind when I think about the classics, where something like this has kind of been done, is my beloved People of the Black Circle, which is a wonderful, wonderful tale for all kinds of reasons I doubt I need to explain to anybody listening to Rogues in the House. And I've done a whole episode of So I'm Writing a Novel where I talk about how great it is and compare and contrast it with some Lynn Carter stuff to really get across how great Conan can be or not be. But, essentially that is what I would call a more romance-infused sword and sorcery story, because you have this big arc with, evil wizards and all the other good stuff that you want. But really it's about relationships, right? You have a couple of side characters that are villains in their own relationship, which, like, literally the power of love is what keeps the evil wizard and that couple like alive in a big confrontation in the middle of the story. But also you have Conan and the princess, the Devi Yasmina, who meet quite early in the tale and have this classic, I hate you. And then over time they get to know each other. And then by the end of it, they're like, oh, Jesus, I want to run away with you and make with the smooches. But we have our classic thematic thing of personal responsibility, personal desire for each other, warring with their responsibilities to others. Each of them have their own respective peoples. He has his warband, she has her kingdom, and neither of them can really fit in with the other one's folks. And so, spoiler for a very old story I think most people listening have read.
It's okay.
So, they end up partying on basically a kind of mutual respect where, she's like, well, you watch out with your warband. If you ever try and raid my kingdom, I'll dust you guys up because I'm a better general. And he's like, I'll show you. I'll steal all your shit. And it's just kind of fun and like a really nice note to end on. And it made me think, God, I want to see more. Like, I get why, like, from a writing standpoint, this has to happen. It's a good way for the story to end. I'm not critiquing Robert E. Howard here. But the fan in me, and this is why you don't always listen to fans, the fan in me wants something else, right? I want them to like kiss and like try living with each other's, peoples and get more stories of like her, having a rough time with his warband, or him having a rough time with, because if he joins her kingdom, he has to be like a harem member, right? Because their culture is like, no, this outsider can't be a king. There's all kinds of like hijinks and stuff I feel you could get into, and I wanted to see that really badly. I know I'm not alone in that. To come back to Lynn Carter, 30 odd years later, him and Bjorn Nyberg wrote one of the I can't remember the name of the title. They're all Conan the Adjective, right? So, one of the
Avenger,
one of the Lancer ones that came after they kind of exhausted the original material by Howard. They wrote
I think
a story
it's Avenger.
Which
Conan the Avenger.
I think it's Adventure. It's like
Avenger.
Book 7 in the series.
Like as in the Avengers, Conan the Avenger.
Oh no, yeah, it's Avenger. Adventurer is 5, which actually, yeah. Anyway, whatever. I'm probably messing this up a little bit, but the point is, in one of the later Lancers, after they exhausted the original Howard material, they did a novel-length story together, and in the middle of it somewhere, the Devi Yasmina shows up again,
Oh,
just pops up, and her and Conan get to like have a night together they never got to have in the original People of the Black Circle story. So it's just kind of funny because when I see that, I'm like, yeah, I'm not alone here, even in like the history of the
yeah.
canon and being like wanting more of the spice, more of the romance with
Mm-hmm.
in that particular relationship. Never mind broadly speaking. So I just kind of thought, I'm not alone here. I can't imagine I'm alone here. This genre is wonderful, but it does tend to be curiously chaste given its history, especially from the 60s onward,
Yeah.
of lots of extreme nudity, sex appeal in general. Obviously, I'm thinking Frazetta's art and so on going forward. But then, like a lot of stories, it's kind of like people just kind of like kiss and fade to black or whatever. Like I said, and the romance is not a big part of it. I think, and this is what my goal was with the anthology, and this is kind of like the remit I gave our 6 authors. I said, look, we don't have to remove anything from sword sorcery to enjoy adding in a bit more spice, a bit more romance. So why don't we do 6 stories where the romance is integral to the story? It wouldn't work without it, but we still have the action, the pacing, the newness, weirdness, and all the things that make SNS great. And to varying degrees, I made a point. I said I kind of give our authors like a roof in terms of how spicy. Like I didn't want to go full erotica, like full deep PNV, whatever descriptions. And again, I wanted an actual story, right? But we did sort of like agree on like a roof of like how spicy it could be. And I said, look, you don't have to go right up to that roof, but you can. That's the point of the roof. And it was interesting seeing how where each of the 6 authors chose to go with that in their stories. And how well they integrated it, which I think they all did a great job. And I know, you're selling a book, you would say that, but honestly, like we're in the middle of editing right now. Like I could fix it if I thought someone didn't. But I was very happy to see right out the gate in the first, developmental edit drafts, our authors all made a really good job of navigating all the like little tightropes that we're walking here, right? Because it's like, well, okay, like I said, make sure the romance is integral, but also make sure we're still telling a sword and sorcery story, but also make sure this and that and this and that. So yeah, it's been an interesting alchemical mixture, and I think it was one worth brewing up. I really hope people enjoy the anthology once they manage to get it in their hands.
That actually sounds like a good segue where you're at the editing portion, kind of, because my next question for you is, you have been the editor as well as publisher for the issues of Ness, which is New Ed Sword and Sorcery magazine, in case we need to repeat that. But now you're just the publisher as the role on this book, and you have an editor. Talk to me about how you navigate, I don't know, just sort of bequeathing that responsibility and just being the publisher rather than you're like the producer, and your editor now would be like your director. Does that sound
honestly
reasonable?
Not a bad way of putting it. Yeah. No, I'm the guy running around making phone calls and chewing a cigar while
we need more.
More spice over here, less over there. Jay Wolf, I should really make a point of naming, highlighting, underlining. Jay Wolf is the editor of Beating Hearts and
Thank you.
Battle Axes. And Jay is someone I just got to know through online, like so many of the people I do publishing stuff with. And Jay definitely knows SNS. We sort of joke that they come more from the Elric school and I come more from the Conan school in terms of our predilections, but whatever.
It's good alchemy.
Yeah. It's all good. It's all SNS. And Jay also has a much better understanding than I do of the kind of the romantasy, sort of sphere of the hard R romance Harlequin, which I must stress is not what we're doing here with the very strict, they kiss on page 3, they have to have a happily ever after, etc. That's not the realm we're playing in, but it's important to understand it so you don't wander into it by accident. So the point is, Jay really understands the bigger, broader picture of people who write romance, romantasy, whatever, than I do, and I thought that would be a good expertise to bring in for this project for obvious reasons. I also know that Jay does professional, editing, and I've seen some of their work in that regard and was impressed by it. And I knew, just from a practical standpoint, that I'm still as we speak, still tying off a lot of loose ends with producing issues 3 and 4 of New Age Sword and Sorcery, and I predicted correctly, as it turns out, in advance, that if I try to be producing the new issues of the magazine and building the crowdfund for the anthology and editing the manuscripts for the anthology, I think my brain would melt and leak out of my butt. So
gotta know your limits, dude. You don't want that leakage.
Yeah, no, you do not. No, you do not. And yeah, I mean, funny you mentioned film metaphors there because definitely like something I'm glad I had drilled into me by my younger days doing indie film and web series and that kind of thing was the importance of knowing when you delegate and not
Yeah.
being a total control freak. That being
Yeah.
said, I have not surrendered all my control freakishness because I should probably read the stories I'm publishing. I think that's a reasonable thing to assume.
Yeah.
So what we've done is Jay is the editor, capital E editor. Jay is the only one talking with our authors about their stories, but the very first drafts that we get submitted in, the dev edit drafts, I read all of them and I give Jay my thoughts, and then Jay, takes those and does with them what they will, synthesizing them into their feedback to the authors as they will. So yeah, like I have some input for sure, but I'm not taking like the driver's wheel. I'm the backseat driver, I guess, for one stage of the editing, and then I back off because I have to trust Jay, and that's been very important. Is being able to trust your collaborator. To our cover art, it is a beautiful wraparound, like I mentioned, by M.E. Morgan. And the cover, the front cover in particular, really riffs on in my opinion, on classic Savage Sword covers. I sent about 24 of those to Emmy Morgan and Jay, and was kind of like this, but a little more sexual tension. And so, we made a big deal about like the eyes of the barbarian and like the civilized looking warrior woman that are fighting together on the cover. Like they got to be looking at each other, even though they're surrounded by enemies. This kind of like, all right, we're gonna cut off some heads, but then we're gonna go somewhere else and do something else, and then.
I mean that is like that's something that whether that is written into those stories or not, it's part of that story either way. So whether the author is putting that point of view in there and we're getting those thoughts, if you think of yourself in those situations, you're a soldier for hire, a desperado of sorts, and you're going out and kicking ass and your blood is up. I mean, it's going to be up for other things too. So,
yeah,
I mean, I think
many,
it is
many
it's
times
totally
people have written about this. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, that it makes total sense. And the other thing to mention too is if we were talking about Sword and Planet and we said, the edge, like romance, then no one's going to bat an eye, right? It's just almost, you're fleshing that out and popping it in the Venn diagram genre wheel. And yeah, it's okay. I want you to tell me a little about the authors you selected for this project. This was not a submission thing. This was, you reached out to some people. Now, without us taking, 3 hours to go through, do you want to give us just a rundown of the authors and maybe a little bit about what you think they bring to the table for this kind of antho?
Sure thing. Okay, so speaking of trust again, but also me being a little bit of a control freak, as you say, we're doing commissions only for this volume of the anthology. People have been asking me about will there be more, will there be submissions? If this book does well enough, then I think I would love to do Beating Hearts and Battle Axes Volume 2 next year. And for that, certainly some or all of it would be open submissions. But for this first one, it was like, well, we're trying to really thread some specific needles. We want to be particular. Okay, we're going to do commissions and we're going to be very careful who we choose to have in it. So the way we did it was I said to Jay, look, I'm going to pick 3 sort of SNS heads that 2 of which have been in the magazine. I went straight to my Rolodex for that. And Jay, you pick 3 people who are maybe like a little outside the SNS choir, but they'll understand the genre as well as have a good understanding of the whole romantasy kind of thing we're trying to bring in. So I chose. I was like, okay, I want some real solid SNS here. David C. Smith. He's an absolute veteran. What he brings to it is the fact that he's been writing it since the 70s. He was there for the second wave. And, I've worked with him a couple of times in the magazine. He is a consummate professional, and he frequently teaches me new words. A couple of times in editing, I'll be like, I don't know about this word. And he's like, actually, sir. And I'm like, oh, okay.
I think I've done that for you once or twice, but it was like a weird
I just don't know words.
No, you know words. You just, I remember it was, I think it was break words. So I stole break words from, I heard it in Spartacus, the TV series. And so it was like, he's not for breaking words, he's for breaking heads or something like that. And so like, I don't know if break word, maybe it's just a thing that came up in Spartacus. Either way, I stole it.
But of course, if you haven't heard secret. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
here's a really scary secret. It's all been invented, right? We're all just making it up as we go along.
Yeah.
But yeah, so David brings like the absolute veteran, old school SNS author strengths that come with that. And also, I was very keen to see him do romance, and his story made me kind of like laugh in like a really good surprise, like publisher I'm happy way in like the first paragraph. So yeah, I'm excited to see how people react to his story. Then I chose Bryn Hammond, who
Yes.
has always I really like her character, Goatskin, the sort of bandit in her secondary Mongol, inspired world. And even her second story in Ness had a bit of a romance angle in it, in the sense that her partner, who goes by many aliases, including Sister Chaos, and is also a bit kind of like a Mongol bandit, their relationship is important to that story. I'll just say that without spoiling the one from issue 1 of Ness. So I kind of said to her, I was like, hey, the stories in this are going to be twice as long as what we usually do in Ness. It's going to be 12,000 words because you want to give room for relationships to build. It's, you need a minute for that. Do you want to maybe go a little deeper into exploring this relationship with your two characters from that one story? And she was like, yes. So Bryn's coming in with like established characters, which is kind of fun. And also like Bryn just has like, she does a good job of kind of bringing like a very flowery, ornate prose while still running that across the solid, bones of classic SNS weirdness and pacing and all that good stuff. I think, and she's also like a real student of history. You'll find a lot of Mongolian kind of like history infusing her tales.
Yeah, no, she gave us a nice little story for a Book of Blades 2 as well.
That's true. Yeah.
So,
and actually, speaking of Book of Blades, let's real synergize here.
Oh.
The third author I chose because of her story in the Book of Blades. I want to say Volume 2. This is
I think she's in both, right?
I think she is, but it was the story in the second volume. I think we
stole Wicked for both of those. Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know who Wicked is, because that's her alias on Discord.
Yes, sorry.
It's all good. I'm talking about author
the Spider Queen.
All AKA Spider Queen, AKA owns a lot of snakes, AKA puts is very considerate and puts spoiler
equestrian
over.
She's an equestrian.
Mistress of animals and farms and whatnot. But yes, also occasionally as an author, she goes by T.A. Marketan. What I really liked about her story in Book of Blades 2 was that it had a kind of sensuality to it that made me think of Tanith Lee, who is absolutely an author who's an exception to what I'm saying when I talk about the history of SNS being largely more chaste. Tanith Lee absolutely brought romance and sexy times to her SNS. And T.A. Marketan brought that along with what I thought was a good sense of humor to her story in Book of Blades too. So yeah, reading that, I was like, okay, I think let's get her in here. So those are my 3 choices, real quick. Jay could give you a better explanation for their reasons for each individual person, of course, because it was their decisions. But Jay brought in Brent Lambert, who has done lots of really cool Black queer fantasy, and he's expressed an interest in SNS specifically. It led to a very funny moment where on Blue Sky, before I had any idea about Brent being a part of this project, I saw him talking about how, I want to do this in a story. Would that qualify as SNS or would that be more epic? I don't know. And I was like, well, actually, pushed up my glasses, slid into the conversation, and politely was like, yeah, I think if you did this, blah, blah, blah. We had it back and forth. It was great. And by the end of it, I was like, this guy seems cool. I'll go to his website. I check out his bibliography. I'm like, oh, he might be good for the anthology. I went to Jay and I was like, hey, what if we got Brent Lambert? What do you think? Have you read his work? And Jay was like, what do you take me for, a Republic serial villain? I made him part of the anthology 40 minutes ago. So that was pretty goddamn funny.
That's and then, yeah.
The second author that Jay brought in is S.L. Wong, who, boy, I mean, they're pretty impressive overall. They really know how to write a sword fight. I mean, let's just talk about that right there, because I can appreciate people might be wondering, like, will this book bring the action? S.L. Wong is one of the reasons that absolutely will. And their most recent book, The Water Outlaws, is a recent book they've come out with that's just fantastic. And Bryn Hammond actually got very excited when we mentioned that we're going to so long.
Oh, cool.
They too, like in a way like Bryn Hammond, bring the historical adventure vibe, which is so key, in my opinion, to SNS, given that it is the direct precursor. And also, they have really great character work, which is key for building romances, right? And then finally, we have Jay's third choice, which is Valerie Valdez, which Valerie and Jay have known each other a very long time. And we talk about the editor-author relationship, and it can be very interesting depending on how well you know the author. I mean, you and I have built this over the last couple of years. I've edited some of your stories, which we'll talk about when we talk about your book. Mm-hmm. So Val and Jay knows Val's work. Knew Val could bring what we want in terms of action, understanding SNS, character-driven, romance, all that good stuff. But also, I think it was appealing to Jay as an editor to work with someone where you already have a deeply established shorthand. Mm-hmm. Like, that is pleasing when you're working with someone creatively and you both have like, oh, that show that we both love to pieces, like that bit, or oh, hey, what about, and like, you kind of, I think it's kind of like fair to, when you're doing all commissions, maybe pick someone you have a deeply established relationship with, because it can really benefit the work on the page.
Oh, totally.
I think that's really like a key thing there. So yeah,
I mean, you get into you get into a relation. Sorry, about like something like that is you already get together where the pieces fit. It's not a matter of reworking pieces and making them fit, that's a fun process too. And that helps build that relationship. But holy crap, are you ever saving time if you just come in and like, we have an understanding?
Well, yeah, exactly. And it does benefit the page. I mean, I can hear someone probably being like, oh, what, you brought in a friend? Like, oh, is that like nepotism or something? It's like, well, I mean, first of all, we all kind of know each other to some degree or another in the world of publishing. There's always, even if you just know of their work. But also, like I say, it directly benefits the work on the page. And we're not doing open subs, so I don't feel bad about it. But yeah, like I say, Valerie brings all the skills you want. And also, I think Jay really wanted to enjoy working with Val on a project together. And I've seen the pages, man. It's paying off. I'll say that. So yeah, those are our 6 authors and what they bring to the table. IMHO.
Awesome. And this actually is another wicked segue because, well, when I think about that, you're offering something in the true New Age, I guess we can call it tradition at this point. We've been hacking away at it for a bit.
We're basically celebrating the 2-year anniversary of me turning to Nathaniel Webb and saying, what if we did a magazine?
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of an anniversary right now. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so I guess it's that part of the mantra or the slogan or the, I don't know, with your magazine is that you're pushing boundaries and adding newness into things. Now, of course, this has, I've read some reactions to that, or people thinking that what we're really saying is that we're getting rid of old stuff because it sucks. And that's not the case at all. What I've observed is that we are bringing in fresh elements that potentially weren't there before, or were not overly exaggerated, or, and also bringing in walks of life that were perhaps not part of this scene. And to me, all I've seen is really positive response and a growing community, which is wicked. And we've changed nothing about the past. And so I would say my question is, what, like here you're kind of leaning into the spicy and the romantasy bit and kind of putting that into the SNS sphere. What, and you don't have to reveal secrets here, but like, what is the next kind of frontier in that regard that you would like to bring to either the magazine or any of your publishing?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, so I mean, just in case anybody's wondering who hasn't heard me say it before elsewhere in all the promo I do, the motto of the magazine, which is one we very much brought to this anthology and will continue to bring to what we do in the future, is made with love for the classics and an inclusive, boundary-pushing approach to storytelling. So yeah, I mean, maybe like what did I talk about earlier? People of the Black Circle, right? Like I have the classics in mind when doing this anthology, and the inclusive thing, I mean, tends to get a lot of conversation, and but that's not what we're going to talk about right now. You weren't asking about the boundary pushing, so I mean, gosh, it is hard actually without spoiling things.
Yeah, I know. I figured, this is me sneakily getting a scoop.
Yeah, I'm all excited, and then I'm thinking, oh wait, crap! Actually, I don't want to give away that. I don't want to give away that.
You know what? I could even reframe it if it helps to be like, what's maybe something that you have seen recently in the sort of stories from this new deluge of authors, perhaps, that you were like, that's cool. I'd like to see more of that even. And you're on the spot. It's okay. I can.
No, that's all good. I just got to think for a second. Well, in terms, so in terms of what I want to see going forward, Sword and Sorcery has a proud tradition of being on the shorter side with their novels, and on being, kind of episodic but kind of serialized in the sense of like, oh hey, it's another adventure with Conan, but you don't have to have read any previous adventures with Conan to have enjoyed it. So I think about that. And I think about publishing as it is right now. Everybody's taking different approaches. Like Howard Edgar Jones is taking what I think is a very cool approach with his Hanuvar series. He's looking at the landscape and saying, okay, well, people for quite a while now have been very in favor of like big phone book wedge fantasy stories, but that length doesn't really work well for SNS. So he took the kind of like TV episodic approach, right, where each volume of Hanuvar is like a bunch of episodes of the Hanuvar show, and the whole volume is like a season of the show. I think that's a very cool take. For me, I think a big part of the future of SNS right now, in the immediate future, is novellas. I think novellas are a perfect form for the longer stories, so you can develop it more and be a bit more to maybe contemporary fantasy tastes, but still like shorter, so works well for the genre, and episodic, so you can have like a new volume each year, kind of like what's being done in other genres. I think of all kinds of stuff like the Murderbot series, for example. Got a new one of those out almost every year, and you can just be dropped into one of the by Martha Wells, and you can be dropped into any installment of Murderbot and be doing fine. But if you read all of them from the beginning, then you're rewarded by noticing little bits and pieces that connect and add up, and I want to do that with SNS. So I guess I'm thinking about format as a publisher when I talk about maybe boundary pushing, because to the best of my knowledge, this has not been done before with SNS. There have been standalone novellas that I'm aware of, and there have been somewhat serialized novels or collections of short story collections. Like, that tends to be what it is, right? We go back to the classic Lancer Conans or Fafhrd Mouse and all that. It tends to be a bunch of short stories in a volume and so on, as opposed to one like continuous story in each volume.
So it makes me think of, like, in keeping with trends, like even when we're talking about Howard's Hanuvar series, where he's thinking about television, right? Each doorstopper he makes is actually an episodic season, as it were, of that TV show. And with those TV shows, we've watched, I think this is pretty much across the board now, where instead of worrying about 12, 13 episodes of your, high quality premium television, it's switched to about 8. Like, most of these big shows are doing about 8 episodes, which to me, I think really reflects, it's not necessarily the doorstopper novel, but you still get the feeling of a season, but you can kind of maintain that quality without having to fill space. So maybe the writing is on the wall in that regard, with our weird attention spans in this day and age.
Oh no, okay. We have a time limit, and we're really butting up against the one from me. But I'm just gonna say right now, you're wrong and you're bad, and you should feel bad, and that's my thesis. And
shit. All right.
I'm just going to go hard on that. No, you're completely wrong. Sorry. It's not attention spans at all. It is, in terms of television, it has so much to do with just the business side of things, and the studios not wanting to risk much money and not wanting to invest in building creators' careers. And I'm not actually thinking they're doing it on that as a guy who trained as a screenwriter and screenwriting pitching, and has gone down that road a few times, to say the least, with trying to get projects off the ground and stuff. Yeah. Holy hell. But nonetheless, I get where you're going in the sense of trying to like connect the dots with what publishing and like maybe, shorter.
I mean, I guess it's what I'm saying is the consumer base is cool with it. So, I mean, for those studios, they have to do less work. They can spend less money. They can, their brand keeps going. People are still subscribing to the services because you get the show, you just get 8 episodes instead of 12. So it all works in their favor. I'm not suggesting they're like, with market research, we've decided attention spans a week and we need to. It's, I think it's that audiences are accepting it too. And I'm only actually speaking from myself as a consumer. I don't actually want 12 episodes. I don't have that in me anymore. I have retreated back to movies so much that, I don't watch a lot of series anymore. So when I see
do like a tight 90-minute movie.
Yeah.
My taste for that has grown.
Or like I'll do like a 3.5-hour movie and I will watch it over 2 evenings and be just fine with it. I watched Apocalypse Now Redux the other day over 2 evenings and I was like, that was satisfying. Anyways.
Well, anyway, I have opinions for days about this stuff, but I feel like it'll take us wildly off track. So, okay, so I'm going to remind folk about my book, and then I think the time has come. Let's switch to talking about you.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah, Beating Hearts and... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. Say your... the last thing I was going to ask you is essentially what's next. And if you don't have a what's next, then just...
I do.
Okay, good. So
pimp your book. Beating Hearts and Battle Axes right now seems on track to fund, and I'm hoping to fund overfund at a nice, satisfying level. We'll get the bonus art, maybe. We'll get the international shipping discount, because I know it's hard out there for Canucks and everybody else in the world who are not in America when a book's produced out of there. So those are our two big stretch goals.
Yeah, and I applaud that stretch goal. I got to tell you, over and over, I applaud that. It's not only smart but responsible. Sorry, dog chaos upstairs.
That's all right. Thank you. Yeah, no, I just, it's like so much else I do with the, what we publish. I think, what would I appreciate? And as a guy in Canada, I would appreciate a shipping discount now and then. So yeah, so those are our stretch goals. Like I say, more art and the shipping discount. So I'm hoping to hit those things. And if we can get into those stretch goals, like there's kind of hidden nested stretch goals, right? Because it's like, if we go that high, I'll also raise enough money to invest in the next book. What's the next book? Well, if all goes according to plan, I'm hoping in the fall of this year to crowdfund essentially an Ace double. For those of you who don't know what that means, Ace is a publisher that had a long-running series of what they called Ace doubles, which were novel-sized books, but they were really kind of like two novellas or very short novels paired together. There'd be a completely different cover on either side, The Adventures of So-and-so by this guy on one side, and like the spaceship of blah, blah, blah on the other side by another person. And it was kind of fun because you would like finish one story and then flip it around and start from the other side and read the other story. And often they would pair like one really big name with one very small name as a way of like getting the small name out there kind of deal. You buy it for the Asimov on one side to check out, Billy whatever on the other side. Anyway, I think it's a really cool format. As someone who loves art direction, I really love that it gives me an excuse to do two very different covers in the same book. And it's also really fun to think about the pairing, right? Who do you pair? Why do you pair them? So yeah, what am I going to do? Well, I'm still pondering what I'm going to call mine. I'm not going to call it an Ace double. I'm not even Ace. But double-edged twin blades, something like that. I'll figure it out between now and then. We want to put out essentially an Ace double in quotation marks with Bryn Hammond, who I mentioned earlier, on one side, returning with her character Goatskin, who will be leading a very dangerous, very weird infused kind of like merchant caravan through not the Gobi Desert. And we'll see what they encounter there. On the other side, we will have a different sort of fantasy Mongolian character, Orhan the Snow Leopard, a well-established at this point, very strong character by Daryl Keogh, who has had many adventures in Nest and in his own collections elsewhere. And in that one, it's going to be kind of like spatially the exact opposite. It's going to be this total pressure cooker of a siege where Orhan very quickly gets stuck right in the heart of it with way too many people who want to kill him. And he's got obligations that make it impossible for him to just leave, to say, screw this and run off. And I remember I said to Daryl, we figured out that premise pretty early on, and then I, of course, got out of his way. But just before I did, I said, I want this to just be like a huge snake of stone city walls constricting around Orhan the whole time with, on the cover, I'm imagining like all these daggers and things pointing inward, whether it's the army outside the walls or people on the walls who don't like him, somebody else running around, between the alleyways looking to kill him. I don't want to give it away, but I just read the manuscript and god damn. So yeah, and Bryn too, they both really brought their A game. They were both so excited when I said to them, like, hey, do you guys want to do like a novella length story? And we want to pair you two together like a great record with an A side, B side, kind of situation. Yeah, I am. You can tell from my energy level going back up again. I am very pumped for that book, and we are going to traditionally print it so that we can do cool stretch goals. Like we're going to have the painted edges. What color will it be? Yellow, red, green? I don't know, but we're going to do that. We'll make it like a classic 70s paperback situation.
That's wicked.
And if we hit a real banger of a stretch goal, there will be that middle point, right, between the ends, the very ends of each story. You don't want to finish one story and then go oops and kind of upside down read the end of the other one before you've read the whole thing. Yeah. So I'm going to think hard about what divider will be in there. But if we hit one of our stretch goals for that I really want to hit, that divider will be a 2-page full color insert art spread with big
I was gonna say, splash page.
It's big 2-page splash page kind of situation. I'm not going to spoil who the artist is, but I'm very excited for it. I can also tell you that the cover artists are people to be excited about. For one side, I won't say who, that'll be later, Goran Gligovic, who has done all kinds of amazing work. If you don't know who Goran Gligovic is, look him up. Among other things, he did a bunch of basically stills from an imaginary Elric animated series that got a lot of like memification passed around and so on. But yeah, and on the other one, Artyom is a fantastic artist who has a very kind of Mignola, Kirby infused kind of comic style.
Yes.
And actually, you will get to see his work with Matt's story in New Edge Sword and Sorcery. I want to say issue 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very pumped to see those covers and to see how they're going to like kind of riff off of each other because, like I said, they're going to be kind of in dialogue, right? I mean, we've got this like big expansive wasteland and freedom and moving through that on one side, on the other side the tightly constricting sea story. How are we going to visually match these together? I can't wait to figure that out. Like I said, I love art direction.
That's rad.
So that is the very next big project that we have coming down the pipe, and there more issues in the magazine, and hopefully a whole bunch more novellas next year.
Wicked. And so an ace double, which is not unlike what this episode is. So let's flip this book over. And
nice segue.
Yeah, and I've got them this morning, man. I'm telling you. We're recording in the morning, which is unusual for me. So I'm probably sharper than at the end of an evening. In any case, timestamp, here we go. I guess we're on the Rogues in the House portion of the show. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yep.
All right, Oliver, I've got a book coming out.
You do.
What do you want to know?
What's it called, Matt? Can you tell us in a nutshell, what is this book and where does the title come from?
Okay, my book is a long time coming. Basically, it kind of, over the last 8 or 9, maybe almost 10 years now, I think, I decided to actually make a concerted effort to try and write fiction. I've always written things throughout and I've had it was kind of like, ooh, that's really good. Hey, can I use your paper to show my other university students? Or, that kind of crap. Or, wow, your film reviews were awesome and blah, blah, blah. And so I was always like, oh, yeah, that'd be cool. Maybe I'll do that someday. Anyways, eventually I saw these cool things happening in Sword and Sorcery. And I decided I wanted to try my own hand at writing stories. So I did. And of course, I sucked for a while, even though I technically got the first things I wrote got published in free for exposure crap. I'm not really coming down on that.
You gotta start somewhere.
Exactly.
Start somewhere.
And then,
I've plucked out more than one author for the magazine from free for exposure kind of publication.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely gems in there. Yeah. And at that point, I didn't care. For me, it was just, it was wanting to gain the momentum and to stroke any ego enough to keep me going, right? Because I end up doing artistic pursuits and then I quit them. But this one I've stayed with for like a decade, and I'm pleased that I did. So this book, To Walk on Worlds, is a collection of the stories that I think didn't suck over the years that I've written. Half have been published elsewhere, and another half are all brand new for those who've not ever beta read them or something from me for a favor. And it is a shared setting, like I don't know, I guess like you're talking about with other continuity. Like, you don't need to read them in sequence. In fact, they're not even in chronological sequence. I placed them in this book as I think is coolest. Each are filled with Easter eggs that line up for the others. You have reoccurring characters. And so I did my world building for this setting as the stories necessitated. I always kind of turned up my nose when people were like, oh, I got this huge world building project and like, I got all these cool things. I'm like, cool. What game are you GMing? And they're like, no, I'm writing a novel. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't care. Cause that's not, I don't like, that can be awesome, but like, how's your writing? Is it good? Yeah. Work on that first. And so I always discipline myself with, I'm not thinking too hard about it. I'm just writing what I'm writing what world elements the stories need and reflect my flavor of fantasy that I want to see. And so, To Walk on Worlds, this title actually comes from a Mastodon song on their third
social media platform, right?
No. Mastodon, the grimy, sludgy, anyways, sort of progressive metal band. Anyways, I'm sure many of our listeners listen to Mastodon. The third album, Crack the Sky, it has a lyric in there somewhere. And it might be Lyritosis. I might not even heard it properly, but it was, I have walked on many planets. And that just like sent my brain into a thing about, I had also heard someone saying they wanted more sword and planet in Sword and Sorcery. So like that cosmic element. And I'm like, that's exactly what I want. And so I created this character, Maxis, who is one who walks on worlds. He's like, I wanted to put sci-fi elements into my Swords and Sorcery without any, identifiable spacecraft or wires or microchips or, any of that stuff that kind of hurts. Like, I want it to be like that super science or super science fantasy stuff where it's any of that, nothing, none of the technology will be recognizable from our world. Okay. So
Hmm.
it's, anyways, so that
Yeah, you
made me
still
think
want
of
it to
that.
be like an awe-inspiring other place,
Yeah.
but
And like,
have some science fiction mixed in with the fantasy.
yeah. And the very, like a very clear, it's the technology is sorcery, but there's also sorcery, and the technology is basically created by gods or what the common folk think would be the gods. So I honestly don't actually put a clear answer on that because that's boring.
Hmm.
And so that's really what this is. It's you've got a monomaniacal meddler sorcerer who is taking a power grab everywhere, and you see what happens with him in various tales. And he seems like a real bastard, and he is. But you'll also see a bit of his a guy who doesn't die, who's immortal essentially, who can hop into other bodies and steal them, or basically smoke drugs and go to other planets. You can't really, death can't get that guy. So how does he change over time, and what men does he choose to respect, or what people are worthy of his respect? And so that's kind of told throughout the tales, but the tales are all really, they work on an individual basis. Um, One other inspiration was there's also a bit of heavy metal roots with the band The Sword. They have an album called Warp Riders, which I think is unquestionably their best album. Just that idea of cosmic tone and like sword and sorcery, sword and planet rooted. They've got little lyrical flourishes in there, helped inspire me too. So I don't know, man. That's kind of what you're in for there. It's definitely swords and sorcery tales, a little dark fantasy. I try to lean into some comedy with that a little, not necessarily like haha punchline jokes, but I like my characters to sound like interesting people to talk to. I don't want, it's not all edgy. There's not a lot
No,
of
I know what
super
you mean.
edgy
Like
content.
you can have humor. It's like the difference between humor that's just kind of quippy punchlines, like you say, that are kind of dropped in
Yeah.
from above by the author, and humor that kind of evolves naturally out of the events and behavior
Hmm.
and character. Like that's more the kind of thing I think you're talking about. That I personally also find more satisfying.
Yeah, and I mean, I,
Yeah,
I, I always say like we have that in Conan too. There is the humor in
yeah,
Conan. Him being jailed and then braining that dude with a beef bone in Rogues in the House. Like that's funny, man. That is funny
yeah.
stuff. And like even this guy tried to break my neck, but I broke his. Like that's hilarious. Just,
Yeah, no, it's not just the melancholy; it's also the mirth.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly,
Uh,
exactly. So that's
well,
my answer to your first question, Oliver.
I accept it.
Okay, good,
You
good.
passed the first test. My the second, however. Okay, so yeah, so as you mentioned, these stories do represent many years of work, and I personally
Hmm.
think that's really cool. I love watching the evolution of an author. I think it's really fun, either moving up and down the bibliography or just reading a singular collection like this,
Hmm.
which covers many years, and someone who's I think for very few writers ever consciously go, I'm done trying to get better at this.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think it's fair to say, like, you set out on a real mission, like, specifically, like, I want to build my craft. So
yeah.
I'm curious, looking at all these stories together, you're reviewing, what you've accomplished, the stories that weren't published or the stories that were published here or there or whatever, the free guys, the
Hmm.
big magazines you're proud to get into, how would you say your style has evolved?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I mean, for me, I would say I kind of approached it from a skill set point of view at the beginning. So I did fall into a little bit of a trap of reading do's and don'ts of writing advice, but honestly, I think I gleaned more good than bad from that. Um, like it kind of comes down to don't do poorly and do this because there's an expectation of the reading brain. So, and I'm this might come up later too, but I'm an English teacher as well. So I try to make I go for clarity. I'm not trying to confuse you with, um, being vague about things or this or that. So I guess what I'm saying is
Mm,
throughout that time, I learned particular lessons with each thing that I wrote. And that meant a lot of stories just went straight to the cutting room floor, never to be resuscitated. And that's okay because from each of those, I did learn a thing. So for me, it's like doing things like right leaning sentences, right? Like making sure that
yeah.
the action keeps flowing, locking down that point of view. I I, I struggled with point of view originally because it's like you get into that trap of I want to be able to get into all the characters' heads, and then I was like, wait, no, I don't. I didn't actually want that. And then I don't really like head hopping, especially with a third person limited point of view when it doesn't have a chapter break. And I have read books, modern books by awesome authors and books that I love that do that. And I'm like, you're breaking a rule I don't like. And even though they're doing it with some finesse, those are the things that I basically took and said, my style has this, and I'm going to keep massaging that until I move on to the next thing. So I remember distinctly, I have to have the opening scene clear, solid, good, well-written, or I cannot move on. And because I've had nightmare situations where during these writings, I have essentially I had an entire story written and I could not stick that ending, or the ending doesn't start where the story is good, the beginning doesn't start where the story is good. And I just toss it. Now, some of those I have resuscitated, but I think style-wise, I have learned to balance. I want to get, I don't know. I want to get to the point quickly. I I will unabashedly info dump for like a paragraph when I have to,
yeah.
But there's just things like that where it's another thing Howard Andrew Jones told me early on was just keeping that forward momentum. And I apply that to my game design. I apply it to any kind of storytelling I do, whereas it's like, we don't need to stop here. And if we're stopping and it's about pathos, then great. But not if it's about, just wanking with ideas. And that's honestly a thing that I think separates a lot of highly successful books and books that are a little more niche audience. Like,
yeah, no, I get what you're saying, because it's like, you can have a rhythm. It's not like you want non-stop action, that gets tiresome,
right.
and
That's not
also
the thing. And I don't
encourages
even,
skimming.
writing and reading action is not a thing I even much like. It's something I get in there and I get to those scenes and I move through them, but I don't want that to last a while. It's cool when it's sharp and quick, in my opinion.
Right. And but yeah, like it's like so basically, would you say though, like finding that rhythm, figuring out where to speed up, where to slow down,
Mm-hmm.
and what details to give, right? We all I think pretty quickly learn that you don't want to do the big info dump, but
No.
what do you tell, and in what order, and where, and how do you fit that in? Is something I personally think about a lot. How have you found like figuring out those decisions?
So
from your first story in this collection, let's say, to the most recent one.
in my original artistic pursuits, I wanted to go into filmmaking. And I very quickly realized how much I love film, but don't want to be part of it. Like I love just being a consumer of it. And, I'm pretty nerdy about it. I know a lot of how the sausage is made and history and filmmakers and blah, blah, blah. But I try to treat my prose very much cinematically. I visualize scenes and beats in the same way as if I'm doing a film. And as soon as it feels not like that, that's when I usually say, okay, let's move. We got basically thinking in terms of scenes and pairing that with the overall story structure. That's something that came a little later for me. I think earlier on, stylistically, I had a lot of, you follow these characters on every bit of this little journey, whatever it is, from point A to point B. And I've learned to cut out more of that and just do entire scene breaks and leave scenes a little more quickly. And I can say too that I really feel like I'm at the point where editing is not as much of a pain. Just constructing sentences, not getting hung up on every little bit or trying to make this beautiful. Like, I don't do that anymore. I know what works. I know what will function. And I just am at a stage where I can just kind of get it done. And when I edit, it's a process of removal, but in a little bit of addition, but not a lot. It's like I've learned to edit as I go in a way that is not paralyzing. Whereas it used to be, right? I can't go forward until this is just right. Now I'm just, I don't know. I feel after the almost 10 years, I've got certain things that just don't suck my boots into the mud.
Well, I think that's really great. I feel like finding people talk a lot about outlining. They talk a lot about obviously writing the actual prose on the page, your first draft and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I increasingly feel like finding a healthy relationship with the editing process is key. And I
Mm-hmm.
am one of a few authors I know who I actually editing's my favorite. Editing's my favorite because I don't have the damn blank page looking at me. I don't have the how much detail do I get into with this dilemma of the outline. I just have this sweet finished work in front of me, finished in quotation marks, in the sense that like I have a complete draft, and I get to sit there and I always think of it kind of like almost like a carpenter or something. I'm just sanding this down. I'm just getting all the the rough edges out of this thing, and I like that a lot. I also really like turning into a game, almost like, well, what can go? How much can this lose before it breaks?
Yeah.
I that's my approach anyway.
Well, but that's I mean, that's the writer editor relationship too, right? Like I could not be an editor, but I can self edit fairly well. Like I tend to turn in pretty clean manuscripts. And I mean, that's a kind of a point of pride for me, not just like grammatically, but just I try to get the bullshit out of there ahead of time. And I don't know.
Well, I got to tell you, as someone who has worked with you as a developmental editor, freelance, and also as editor of New Age Story Sourcer magazine, if you want to make publishers, editors like you more as an author, send in clean drafts, by which I mean a draft which has been gone through for typos, for gross grammatical errors, for lots of word echoes, right? We always get like one or two words stuck in our head that we just repeat like 95 times and we don't realize,
And those are the toughest to self-edit, I find. I mean, obviously, if you do a word, control F it, but sometimes you don't think to do that particular word. And I do.
Yeah, for sure. Filler words, whatever. Yeah, like if you hand in to an editor, whether if it's a developmental editor, right? Like you hire them to help you. So why do you want to make them like you more or whatever? Well, it's not about that with them. With the developmental editor, you're paying them to help make your story better. Yep. If they don't have to spend time being like, yeah, these typos, then they have more time and energy to be like, here's how we can really bring your story to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
So you will get the most bang for your buck if you hand a clean draft to a developmental editor. And then obviously with a publisher who has like always way too many things to do, magazine editor or whatever. If you give them a story and go, look, I know you have about 20 minutes to look at my story. Well, not 20 minutes, I'm exaggerating, but you have a very limited bandwidth for editing my story. You've got all these other authors to look at as well.
Yeah.
Here's a story where you don't have to spend any time or a minimal amount of time on like line edit, crap. You can focus on bringing the story to the next level. So same idea there, right? So this is like, I occasionally hear authors, and they're pretty much always beginners, say, well, why do I have to edit it so thoroughly? Isn't that the point of the editor?
No.
And it's like, yeah, but the editor is not spell check. The editor is not grammar check. They shouldn't be,
But you
fulfill that if they have to, but
you want as much fog cleared to reveal your story before it gets in their hands, because as you say, they're going to be hung up on other things and you're not seeing the whole picture. And for me, I have been mortified as someone, like I'm an English teacher. And so, but I can't break down parts of speech down to a science, right? I know my word bits. I know when to use a comma. I know semicolon. I know subject, object, verb. Like I can do all that. But it was always horrifying to me whenever I had a typo in anything, because it's like an English teacher's not supposed to have a typo, but it's like the human brain is pulled in all kinds of directions. You're thinking of different things. But I mean, in some ways, it's just made me a better teacher too, is having to nail all that down and it being a point of pride. I don't know. And it's only in the last year or two that I feel like, holy cow, I'm good enough at this that I'm worth buying it's worth it to buy my stuff and read it. And I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel that way previously.
I'm also going to say, as an editor and dare I say friend, one piece of your craft I would love to see you work on, and we can talk about this off camp, Mike, is selling your stuff. Folks, I'm going to say it because Matt has a hard time, clearly. His writing is strong. It's worth reading. There's a reason I publish him.
Yeah, I know.
I keep hearing you kind of like being like, it's not total anal leakage. No, it's solid stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I do, and I appreciate. It's like, well, we can get into the mental health bit, but like, as much as I present myself as like, and I am a hyper confident person, but things that I really am precious about or care about, that's where my confidence lacks. It's like, and then you're always comparing it to other people. And
it makes sense.
Exactly. It's like, it's, you just don't want to suck at that thing that you most want to do well at. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just it. And it helps too, if I were to get any form of arrogance about it. I mean, I'm proud of my accomplishments. Anytime I sell a story to a place, I feel really great about it. And it helps move me forward. It's just, it helps for me to realize I don't have all the answers. My journey of getting good at this is far from over. And it just keeps enough wind in the sails to keep moving, right?
Yep. All right. Okay. We have a limited time, so let's keep moving. Yeah. I wanted to say, speaking about your writing and why it's great, and so on and so forth. One thing I really like about it is this. Sword and sorcery is often framed as an escapist genre, which for some people is a derogatory statement implying a lack of substance. However, I feel a great strength of your work is that it proves the lie that escapist literature can't have substance, that you have to choose, whatever, between being serious and being fun. Like, why, and serious is not even really the right word. It's like I say, substance, having deeper thematic, stuff going on. And where those deeper themes almost always come from for an author is from their life. Now, the first story of yours I edited, The Gift of Galah, which I believe is in this collection. In particular.
That is in this. That is in To Walk on Worlds.
Yeah. Available now on Amazon. That was influenced by a really major event in your life. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit about that and what it was like processing that event in your writing?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so when I put this book together, I had I have potentially crippling anxiety, and I didn't really realize that until a few years ago when it came to a head. And so hang on. So with that tale, certain things have happened in my life, which I've talked about. And when I was going to actually write this book, To Walk on Worlds, when I'm putting it together, I was going to actually go through and talk a little bit about the stories and where they came from and their genesis. And at a certain point, I decided not to, even though I'm someone who really does love talking about myself, as people who've listened to this podcast know, or anyone in my actual life. I don't have social anxiety whatsoever, but I have health anxiety. I have a existential dread haunting me at all times. And I had always had it, and I didn't quite recognize that before. But germaphobe to a point, just the worrying. And so I've written articles about this. I've talked about it on social media. My brother was diagnosed with ALS, which is the most disgusting, vicious disease on the planet. I think in terms of what it does, it's a terminal diagnosis. And that dropped on us in 2020 when the whole world was dealing with a disease sweeping through it. And so things got very dark. And as much as you hear news like that, I went into basically the mode of trying to keep the family on the rails and ignoring certain things, brave face, strong, trying to make sense of things, even thematic sense of things, and trying to talk about ways that we can approach this that is less dark, or, all that stuff that you try to do when something like that comes up. Eventually, I got it into my head that the same thing was going to happen to me. And this is while my brother was still living. And so you're watching somebody, deteriorate and wither, who is this monumental character in your life. It has an effect on you, as you can imagine. And so The Gift of Galah, I wrote that in a state of literally almost shitting myself each morning out of just anxiety and fear. I wrote it on my phone in a Google Doc. I eventually had more, I sat down and edited a little more sharply, not just having a poop and editing. Okay. And if I'm bringing poop talk into great tragedy, that's all germane to the way I deal with things. So,
yep. And the writing. Yeah. That humor. Yeah.
But I mean, it's exactly melancholy and mirth. And I mean, that's a story about a guy anxiety essentially being personified as a threat that's lurking in this guy. It has his muscles failing and his arms twitching, like I observed in my brother. And then like my brain started to produce in myself. So my anxiety ended up manifesting symptoms of this disease. And it's since gone away, of course, because it was just a weird mind blast. And I wasn't thinking about this at the time. That is a story that kind of poured out of me. I don't have a great memory of it. And as hokey as all that sounds, folks, and I know this sounds like just such bullshit that a writer would say, is that the last few things, the best things I've written over the years, I don't remember writing them that much. And none of it was written intentionally about the experiences in my life, but there is so much unintentional allegory in there. When I went back through and I was just, talking off the cuff with friends of mine about it, it was just amazing. You could just see where my head was swirling. And that's only one piece, right? It's the situation with my brother was like a nuclear bomb that dropped on me, but I also am an adoptive parent. And so at a certain point, my wife and I took in kids. We weren't looking to have kids at all. It was we both work in schools, kids go into care. And so we started fostering from a family. And then you go through that process, and then you like fall in love with the kids and you want to keep them. And then you get to the point where, well, maybe you can't though, because there's a process here. So we have to make sure that they're not going back with biological parents, or that they're not getting taken into another direction or getting them split. Like I had all of that at a time too, where I didn't know if I'd be able to continue with these children. And so like all of that uncertainty and anxiousness ended up coming out in the writing wash, as it were. And so, yeah, if we talk about Sword and Sorcery, had always kind of been escapist to me as a reader. Not entirely though, because Robert E. Howard's Conan is not that. His Cull is not that. You can call it that all you want, but there's themes that run throughout all of that. And those are the things I end up liking and caring more about. And so, I mean, all that stuff made it in there. I don't want to tell a story about just a power fantasy. I mean, I like to have a power fantasy element in the stories, but this is about working through the common struggles that we have in our lives. And why not do that with a Sword and Sorcery lens, right? Why not face that kind of horror with a sword in your hand, even if it's futile? And I've got some real dark endings in some of my stories, and some not. And some are about brotherhood and about fatherhood and about just dread, right? And so I like to think what I'm writing more now has gotten slightly optimistic as we've gone through. And so, I don't know, the last few things I've written, which are not even in the book, I think are the best things I've written, which you can check out in Old Moon Quarterly 7 and New Edge Sword and Sorcery issue 3 upcoming. But yeah, I mean, that's how I answer that question. I can't tell stories without that. Same as if I'm watching movies or reading books. I'm reading between those layers and those lines. And it's not something I think everyone has to do, but I'm more interested in a story that has that, isn't being dogmatic or forced, but if there's no layers for me to look through, I kind of get bored. I want the human element, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, you have a surface. Every story has a surface, and we're talking about adding depth to it, right? And yeah, like you have that surface, have that fun, and that's the thing. Like I read these stories you're referring to that won't be in the collection, and other ones that have been in it that, like say like Gift of Kul, obviously, that have yeah, maybe some darker elements or some heavier elements, whatever you want to call them, but they're interwoven with that fast pacing that you want, with that inventiveness, that fun, wild craziness of what this guy runs into. And I just yeah, you can have it all. I think that's the thing. I find so often I say as an editor and publisher to people, beware false choices.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to choose between escapist fun and a giant ape or whatever, and talking 10-page monologue about angst. Yeah. It's like in both cases, like when people talk about stuff that's really shallow, or they talk about stuff that's like way too heavy. Oh God, I couldn't enjoy myself. Oftentimes, what they're talking about is not what they're just talking about is bad execution.
Yeah.
It's like it's like you actually might like that thing if you just read it, by a more skilled author. So it's a good thing. that you met, a guy who has trouble saying this, I'm going to say this again, are a skilled author, and you
Thank you.
created a really interesting collection of stories here where people can watch you evolve. And yeah, not in perfect linear order, but I think that's fine. And yeah, like I mean, SNS is not perfect linear author, is it?
No, but it's like
linear order.
yeah, well, that's just it.
But keeping the train moving, because I'm worried we're going to go over time here.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about sort of like how your personal life's infused things. I also think about your work life. You and I had a fun conversation when talking about a story. I believe it's the one that's in Old Moon Quarterly. That was influenced by something one of your students said. So you teach junior high.
Yeah.
And I know you try. You don't use exactly the same name as a author as you do as a teacher. You want to keep those worlds separate, but nonetheless, you live your life day in, day out. Mm-hmm. And at least in one instance I'm aware of, you talk to your students about your writing, about sword and sorcery. Yeah. So could you tell us maybe a little bit about what I'm alluding to in terms of how working with these kids affects what you create?
Yeah. Okay. So yes, I teach junior high, and junior high students are hilarious because it's like, I think it's the funniest age for human beings, right? They're no longer little kids. They're starting to learn things, but they don't know that much, and their grasp of sarcasm and all these things, it's just they're funny creatures, and you have to really enjoy them or don't teach junior high. That out of the way, of course, I talk to them about things that I write, and I mention the fact that I sell stories. Yes, I get paid to do that too, kids, because you want to, the 2 or 3 writers in every class who want to go up and get into the arts and actually make it as part of their lives. It's good for them to see that you can make money to do it. And I also like to model having a career and doing the other thing so you can not starve to death. So the kids are funny. They know I write. I keep those worlds separate just because, I don't want to be, it's just, I don't want to encourage anyone else. I don't want to encourage young people to seek out my work that might be dark or this or that, or their parents thinking I'm like, yeah, kids, buy my stuff. Like, I don't want that, but I want them to know that, you can be a writer. And when I teach them writing lessons, I'm like, you're coming from an expert here, folks. So this is a free lesson. I normally charge for this. Anyways, so when I was brainstorming a story that I was going to submit to Old Moon Quarterly's, I don't know, second last submission phase, you and I were working together because I was like, yeah, let's, help me edit this thing. And so, I hired Oliver to do that. And we had a moment where we wanted to up the weird factor a bit. Because sometimes that, if I am too caught up in the character elements, sometimes I just throw in random things like, oh, he's fighting giant floating squids, or he's fighting giant engineered spiders, or other SNS elements that feel SNS-y, and I don't have to get too deep into why. But there was a particular thing that happens here where something falls out of a creature, and to me, it was like, what is this thing? And maybe it's the power source for whatever this Frankenstein-y monster was. And so I asked the kids, so I was like, I'm struggling. Here are my ideas of a weird thing that could pop out of a creature. And a few interesting ideas came up. One was like a clock. One was like a cage. I don't know what that was about. But one kid jokingly said a baby. And like he was just being trolling. And I was like, hold on now. And then I thought, like, anyways, I can't say more because then it spoils things. Sure enough, that weird bit went into the story, and it ended up, even beyond that, it has continuity into other stories involving the same character. And that kid, whatever, long story short, we got the story edited. Old Moon Quarterly bought it, which was a giant feather in my cap as like the first prorate sale. And so I bought that kid a Fruitopia. I was like, what do you want? I'll give you some kind of food item. You're not getting royalties on this, but so it's awesome, right? I didn't tell you that part, the Fruitopia.
No, yeah. I didn't know. That's what you wanted. Fruitopia out of it.
Yeah, you wanted a Fruitopia, so there you go.
Gorgeous.
Anyways, it's true. Like, the fact is, you can take inspiration from so many things in life, and I did, and I do, and I will continue to.
It's good to bounce things off people, whether it's an editor you hired or that kid in your neighborhood or class.
Especially if you're looking for weirdness.
Yeah, something a little out of left field. I
Yeah,
remember
exactly.
you brought that up with me, and you were like, "What if we? I don't know," but and I was like, "Do it!" Like I just like
Yeah.
yeah, just
Well,
like
no, I had
turn.
another. I was like, yeah, that, but, and you were like, no, not but, that. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, anyways, we took it from there. It's
Not to
cool.
try and take credit. I'm just saying I remember that conversation. It was very funny.
No, but
Yeah.
it also ended up just being so allegorical. Again, not on purpose, man. The amount of serendipitous things that have occurred in my life and the coincidences that have occurred just of recent have freaked me out. Freaked me out. I can't get into it, but it's my wife is like keeping records. It's beyond the pale of what would be expected for coincidences. But that is another story.
Yes, that is a different kind of weird. All right,
Yeah.
man. So listen, we've been talking very much about short stories. It sounds like
Mm-hmm.
that's basically what you have. I mean, okay, you've been doing game writing, but in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
prose fiction, short stories have been where it's been at for you for a decade, right? There wasn't like a side novel or anything I'm unaware of.
No, no, it was all just, and I made a very concerted effort to learn my writing craft with short stories and not with world building, with short stories, right? Each story, try a new technique, try a new skill, and just stick with that so you don't end up with a big manuscript that sucks and crushes your spirit.
Fair enough. Well, but
Because
listen,
that's likely
here
to
we
happen
are.
for your first pass, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. But
Yeah.
now here we are. We've hit this. You've hit this, pardon me, milestone, and you're
Mm-hmm.
releasing this collection. Kind of planting your flag and going, look, I did some writing. God damn it.
Mm-hmm.
What what's next? Do you see yourself like do you keep like like a SNS Alice Munro? Keep hewing to the short stories, or
Mm-hmm.
do you see yourself maybe wanting to try something longer, a novella, a novel?
Well, that's a good question because I keep having a sort of plan and then keep getting sidetracked because I get offers to do things. Whether that is an invitation to an anthology or magazine, or whether that is a sub window that I didn't expect to sell the story to, I end up selling it, and then my story rights get held up. And or the main thing is that I divide my creative time with board game design and role playing game design. So it might sound like 10 years and I have like a handful of stories to release after that time is like, well, geez, what have you been doing? And the fact is, I've been writing various different things, and you got to kind of go for the ones that are going to pay you, right? So that said, I just finished writing my all of my writing work for Conan the Hyborian Age role playing game, published by Monolith. Quick start available now, probably when you hear this episode. Check it out via Monolith. So that sucks up so much of my time, but now I've actually got a fairly clean slate. And what I want to do is, after I release this beautiful book, I want to do a second volume. But I think what I'm going to do is, I've already got 4 stories for it, 2 of which will be in those magazines, so it'll publish after those rights revert. I want to buffer that one, maybe take those 4 stories, 4 short stories, and then buffer it with a novella, because it seems like a natural progression to stay in the same world I've created, perhaps with the same characters. I've got some ideas circulating. And try a novella. That seems like a good stepping stone. Not try and write a doorstopper and pitch it to Tor or try to get an agent or any of that. That's not really in my goals at the moment. I just want to get better. But I think with a follow up to Walk on Worlds, I want to try something longer form, like a nice 30K, 40K story maybe, and have that be the bulk of the second book. So, and I'm told novellas can be hot right now. So yeah, I
Some guy
think
was
that's,
blabbing about that a few minutes ago. Yeah.
yeah, that's my current plan, to do something a little longer form. And honestly, some of the stories I've written, I've written into about 10K, which is probably the ceiling for me so far. So it'll be interesting to see, how do I triple that, right? How's that going to go? How am I going to, will it crack under the weight of my?
Well, I look forward to reading it,
we'll
whether a final draft or maybe I end up working with you on as an editor again. Who knows? We'll see what the future holds.
Could
In
be.
the meanwhile,
I would
we should
recommend
definitely
you
wrap
as an
up.
editor.
Oh, thank you.
And,
I do that for
and
money,
a
folks.
cover layout art.
That's true, and I do that for money too. So I'll do anything for money. But yes, it's late stage capitalism, folks. Got to survive. But in the meanwhile, let's focus on the writing or the publishing in my case, I guess. So to Walk on Worlds, available on Amazon. Just look for that. Just punch in the title, you'll find it. It sounds like, and of course, the link will be in the description. Thank you, Dean. And also, Beating Hearts and Battle Axes. Depending on when you listen to this, the crowdfund ends like noon, July 20th. So if you hear this before then, go run to BackerKit, type in Beating Hearts and Battle Axes, whatever, something like that. You'll get it, don't worry. Or find us through newedgeswordandsorcery.com, or again, the link in the description. Geez, Oliver. Again, thank you, Dean. And even if you go check that out after the crowdfund ends, there'll be a link to where you can buy it once that eventually happens. So yeah, but you want to get on the crowdfund for all the fun exclusives and bonuses and stuff. All right, Oliver, stop talking about your thing. I think we've had a fun ace double of an experiment here for our interview. What do you think, John? Matt?
Yeah, we're like a nice cool hour and 20 mins. I think that's pretty good. We've got our duology of swords and sorcery, some spiciness, some some existential dread flavored. We got it all here.
I'll take it. Yeah. No.
And listen,
we're horny. We're horrified. We got it all. And we also had, of course, an ace double of a podcast situation. So if you're listening to So I'm Writing a Novel and you're like, rogues in the what? Rogues in the House. It's a great sword and sorcery panel discussion. Basically, every episode is a group of fellas, including not just Matt here, chatting about all things SMS. I strongly recommend it.
And likewise, So I'm Writing a Novel is Oliver's other podcast, and it's kind of about his journey writing a novel, but has sort of like, there's tons of interviews there with awesome prominent people in swords and sorcery. So like, go check that out if you have not already. And if our audiences check each other's shows out, then we've done cross promotion in a way that isn't stupid. And I think we might have tried a good idea here, but we'll see.
Well, folks, you show us. Was it a good idea?
Yeah. And if not, to hell with you. May your swords always remain sharp.
I do not have a fun sign off. I just sort of say goodbye. So goodbye.